You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, February 7th, 2018, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. How you doing? Did you miss me? It's our first of our weekly podcast now that we've downshifted into the weekly mode, but stay tuned and buckle up because we've got 2 hours of prime marijuana politics content for you today. Lots of news to get to. We'll cover that in the cannabis headline news, some of the latest stuff that includes some testimony from Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury. We'll have more audio on that in hour 2 as well. We'll give you the complete audio as he was grilled by 3 of our congressmen from legal states, California, Colorado, and Washington State. So that's coming up in the cannabis headline news with a little more audio in hour 2's Toker Talk Radio. Speaking of more audio, Attorney General Jeff Keebler Gump Sessions is back in the news. He was speaking out at the Heritage Foundation. And in our What in the News segment, I got some new audio from the Sling Blade Hobbit to just further reiterate how reefer mad this man is, and that's coming up after the news. Also, in our first hour, the anti-drug public service announcement of the day, followed by our Midwest Cannabis Chronicle. There's a great piece in Politico by a friend of the show, Jim Higdon, that we're going to be getting to that details some pro-marijuana Democrats, particularly in the states of Indiana and Kentucky, and how they're putting marijuana front and center and saying legalization is long overdue. So we'll get to that coming up in the middle of the show. Then, toward the end of the show in the Radical Rant, I got to take our local KGW News to task, the local NBC affiliate in their news station, doing a story on an explosion that happened last summer. It blew a house apart here in North Portland because of butane hash oil, which they're saying butane is an ingredient in butane hash oil, so I got to correct that. Plus, I'll tell you why their solutions from law enforcement on what to do about the BHO explosion problem are completely the wrong direction to go. I'll tell you exactly what would help solve this problem. Then stay tuned for hour 2 Toker Talk Radio. We've got another bad policy idea on limiting potency, plus some Bobby Kennedy audio for you. But first, let's get to the news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for the week of Wednesday, February 7th, 2018. I'm Radical Russ Belville. 3 congressmen from states with legal marijuana businesses asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin about the issue of legal marijuana business access to traditional banking, which has been thwarted by cannabis's federal Schedule I status. Representative Brad Sherman, a Democrat from California, warned Mnuchin that removing the Obama-era guidance on FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, would be a bonanza for armed robbers since it would leave these businesses operating with, quote, bags of cash, leading Mnuchin to respond.
I can commit to you that we are reviewing it, but I assure you we don't want bags of cash. We want to make sure that we can collect our necessary taxes and other things in other than
when
cash.
You were here last.
Representative Denny Heck, a Democrat from Washington, wanted a better explanation of what "we don't want bags of cash" really meant, which elicited this commitment from Mnuchin.
The intent is not to take it down without a replacement that can deal with the current situation.
A powerful Republican-controlled congressional panel has blocked yet another marijuana amendment from being considered on the House floor. The measure, sponsored by Congressman Jared Polis, Democrat of Colorado, would have prevented the Department of Justice from spending money to prosecute people who are in compliance with state marijuana policies. The congressman and cannabis law reform supporters want to attach the amendment to a must-pass spending bill to avoid a government shutdown this week. But the Rules Committee voted 8-3 along party lines to block the measure from being considered by the full House, with one Democrat, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter of New York, voting present. Committee Chairman Pete Sessions, a Republican of Texas, is a notorious opponent of liberalizing marijuana laws. Last month, when an identical amendment was considered, Sessions said,
"We have an opioid addiction problem. And what do? We go and politically push this garbage. Illegal drugs, garbage."
The city of San Francisco will retroactively apply the state's new marijuana legalization law to past cases, a move that will wipe thousands of criminal convictions off the books, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. San Francisco District Attorney George Gascon announced the move Wednesday and said that thousands of misdemeanor and felony convictions, going back decades, will be expunged or reduced. The decision will affect thousands of city residents whose convictions hurt their chances for employment or obtaining some government benefits. Other cities across the state are pursuing similar measures, including Oakland, where Assemblyman Rob Banta, a Democrat, has introduced a bill into the state assembly to, quote, allow automatic expungement or reduction of a prior cannabis conviction, end quote. U.S. Attorney for Oregon Billy Williams told a large gathering that included Governor Kate Brown, law enforcement officials, and representatives of the cannabis industry that Oregon has, quote, an identifiable and formidable overproduction and diversion problem. That's a fact, he told the crowd at the U.S. District Courthouse. Continuing, quote, and my responsibility is to work with our state partners to do something about it. Make no mistake, we are going to do something about it, but that requires an effort to do this together. It requires transparency. The facts are what they are. The numbers are what they are, end quote. Williams didn't detail how his office will carry out a new federal directive stripping legal protections for marijuana businesses. He said his office needs more information so it can accurately assess the scope of the problem and come up with a response. Williams didn't say what data he's looking for, but he previously has said he wants more information from the state about black market trafficking. On February 1st, 2018, Maine became the first jurisdiction in the nation to protect workers from adverse employment action based on their use of marijuana and marijuana products, provided the use occurs away from the workplace. In preparation for this change, the Maine Department of Labor has removed marijuana from the list of drugs for which an employer may test in its model applicant drug testing policy. Although wrangling between the state legislature and Governor Paul LePage has delayed the retail sale of marijuana, the remaining provisions of Maine's Question 1 are slated to move forward despite fears doing so will hurt business in the state. The law does not affect compliance with federally mandated testing for marijuana, such as testing under the U.S. Department of Transportation regulations of certain commercial motor vehicle drivers or related prohibitions on marijuana use. It remains to be seen whether the non-discrimination provisions contained in the law will be enforced by the courts, especially given the conflict between federal and state law.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And let me be clear about marijuana. It is a potentially dangerous gateway drug that frequently leads to the use of harder drugs.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana.
This is Radical Russ Belville with a word about dealing with police. Whether marijuana is legal in your state, whether you're a medical marijuana patient, or whether you're a cannabis consumer just trying to survive under prohibition, you should always affirmatively assert your rights in a police encounter. This means you don't answer police questions without your attorney present, and you never consent to a search. Police are not your friend. Besides showing your insurance, registration, and driver's license, there are only 3 things you should be saying and 1 thing you should be doing. I cannot answer further questions without my attorney present. I do not consent to any searches. Am I under arrest or am I free to go? And then leave once you've been cleared to go. Don't stick around for any little talks the officer wants to have. Learn this lesson well, and unlike me, you won't have a criminal record.
The Marijuana Agenda Free Podcast is available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, SoundCloud, and on our Facebook page at MJ Agenda. Free video archives are available at the Radical Russ channel on YouTube. Help keep this media free by making a donation at paypal.me/radicalruss.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical. Really tough, really big, really great.
To infect and rot our nation from within.
Dangerous gateway drugs.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
To build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
In the news.
One of the recurring themes I have in discussing this war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs is how much it is really a culture war. This is really about maintaining the status quo with respect to white male superiority and the patriarchy and whatever else you want to call it, the 1%, the institutions, the corporations, whatever label you want to put on it. It's all about maintaining the dominance of the status quo, and marijuana legalization flies in the face of that to these people, not on a scientific basis or a public policy basis, but on a cultural basis. It to them represents what we are not. It represents to them radicalism and left-wing thinking and anti-war and introspection and love thy neighbor, Christian values and such. They can't really deal with it so much. So it's always instructive to me to listen to what these people say and how they react to the issue, because it's not a matter of them being afraid that there's too many people dying or being addicted, although they'll say it that way. It really just has to do with what they think is a permissive attitude, letting people just run wild and be bohemian and just let their inner child run loose. They can't stand this idea that people might be having some fun somewhere. And nobody sums this up better than our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who is such the rabid drug warrior. And the latest example of this was his speaking out at the Heritage Foundation. This, of course, is the highly conservative evangelical group, the Heritage Foundation kind of think tank there. And he was speaking with regard to the anniversary of President Reagan. It was a dedication to President Reagan's birthday. So this happened this Tuesday, yesterday. And he had a few things to say about various things like immigration and other ways that the Department of Justice is operating under the Trump administration. But he did take some time to criticize marijuana, or more particularly that it's the media that is to blame when it comes to the recent growth in support for legalized marijuana.
We don't think illegal drug use is recreation, lax enforcement, permissive rhetoric, and the media have undermined the essential need to say no to drug use.
It's the media's fault. The media has eroded the support for the drug war. Maybe it was because the media started reporting on how many people were having their lives ruined by the drug war. Maybe it's because the media started showing some of these cop body cams, showing them planting drugs and using the drug war as a way to just go after certain people of a certain class and a certain status. Maybe that's why. Maybe the media started actually reporting on mass incarceration and what's going on with the drug war. Maybe the media kept reporting on all these people who were getting healing relief from using medical cannabis. Maybe the media was putting up too many stories of little girls curing their epilepsy with CBD oil. Yeah, you're right, Jeff Sessions. Maybe it is the media's fault. Maybe it is the media's fault for exposing to the people the truth about cannabis. Now, Sessions, of course, speaking to the Conservative Heritage Foundation audience, wants to portray himself and portray the Trump administration as being law and order, tough on crime. And in that regard, he referred to the recent rescinding of the Cole memo that allowed the state legal medical marijuana and state legal marijuana, for that matter, to proceed pretty much unhindered by the Department of Justice. Sessions says those days are over.
And we're not going to pretend that there's not law against marijuana. There is a law, federal law against marijuana. And we're not going to pretend marijuana is good for you either. I don't think it is.
It's nice. He doesn't think marijuana is good for you, but we're not going to pretend. We're just not going to pretend anymore that marijuana is not against the law. Look, that wasn't the case in the Obama administration. They didn't pretend it wasn't against the law. They just set out a memorandum that said, look, we got a whole lot of other things to deal with. We got the potential for terrorism. We've got to look up Hillary's email server, whatever else it was. There's more things to do than to be busting people for weed. But again, for Sessions and these guys, it comes down to a cultural argument. It's a cultural argument. And to them, people that have problems with addictions have a moral failing. They have a failing of willpower, because as far as Trump is concerned and Sessions is concerned, you might as well resurrect Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan and bring back Just Say No.
Don't start. That's what President Trump said to us the other day in a meeting. Don't start. What did Nancy Reagan say? Just say no. Don't start this stuff.
Okay, now that might be a valid point for someone. Don't start taking opioids, but what if their doctor is prescribing them to them? What if they are in severe pain and they require these drugs? Don't start and just say no are lousy things to tell the people who've already started and just said yes. If they've got the problem, it's a little too late to say, just say no. But as far as Sessions is concerned, and this is really interesting, I've been talking a lot about how I believe the Trump administration is going to hammer away this idea that marijuana is a gateway drug, that the problem with the opioid crisis is heroin dealers and heroin dealers getting their customers who started on marijuana. That's what they want to play this, and they're specifically going to play away and soft sell and whitewash the role that the opioid producing pharmaceutical companies had in this. But one way they want to try to do this is blame the doctors. Here's Sessions with his stellar understanding of how opioid addiction works.
We're just describing too many. Sometimes you just need to take 2 bufferin or something and go to bed.
He says we're prescribing too many of them. Sometimes you just need to take 2 bufferin and go to bed. Again, a willpower thing. You're not toughing it out. You're not handling your pain like a man. What, you need these prescriptions from your doctors. There's a serious problem with pain in this country. And that's one of the problems that's happening as we attack this opioid crisis. And it always happens when it happens in medical marijuana, happens in the opioid crisis. Anything you do to crack down on people getting high doesn't stop anybody from getting high, but it does stop patients from getting their medicine. Every single time. The person who's got the addiction, the very definition of addiction is I will do anything to get this thing. They can usually find a way to jump through the hoops. It's that sick person who has lost the ability to jump financially or physically or whatever it might be, metaphorically or literally. They're the ones that get crushed in this, and there's going to be all sorts of pain patients out there who Sessions says, they're prescribing too many. They're prescribing too many. Their doctors are going to stop prescribing, and guess what? The addiction doesn't go away. And guess where they go to find that medicine when they can't get the prescription? They go to the heroin. That's the gateway. Cutting down on the legitimate pain patients is the gateway. But he thinks, it's coming from marijuana. And really, he literally thinks this. This is not in the question and answer session that happened after this speech that he gave. He was asked about the opioid crisis and once again ties it to marijuana.
The DEA said that a huge percentage of the heroin addiction starts with prescriptions. That may be an exaggerated number. They had it as high as 80%. We think a lot of this is starting with marijuana and other drugs too.
Even when his own DEA says 80% is coming from people that started with prescriptions, he just brushes that aside. Oh, that's an exaggeration. It's got to be an exaggeration. It can't be that high. We think a lot of it starts with the marijuana. It's got to start with the marijuana, right? Because the marijuana leads straight to the opioids, right? But there was one little clip, one little 4-second bit, and I don't know if he meant to say it this way. I think it was a Freudian slip. Listen for yourself.
We've taken many other steps to reduce the rule of law in the department.
We've taken many other steps to reduce the rule of law in the Department of Justice. Maybe the first honest thing Jeff Sessions has ever said.
That sucks. I hate...
Yeah.
We've taken many other steps to reduce the rule of law in the department.
Taken many other steps to reduce the rule of law in the department. That's pretty damn accurate. All right, we're going to take a break. The anti-drug public service announcement of the day is coming up. And after that, a Midwest Cannabis Chronicle taking a look at Jim Higdon's latest piece in Politico on red state Dems. We've got audio from Indiana and Kentucky after this. If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
The marijuana agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer. The Marijuana Agenda is a listener-supported independent podcast brought to you by Radical Russ Media, LLC. Subscribe to our VIP feed at mjagenda.com for access to our ad-free podcast segment archive. Make a one-time donation to support the Marijuana Agenda at paypal.me/radicalruss. Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Some kids think smoking weed makes you cool. What about those who think you already are?
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com or download the free podcast at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Oh, I could have smoked that pot.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Welcome to the Midwest Cannabis Chronicle. Today, we catch you up on the latest news and speak with an expert from the great Midwestern region of America, from the Great Lakes to the Great Plains, including some of the latest states to embrace medical marijuana to the last states to resist it. Join us now to discuss hemp in the heartland with the Midwest Cannabis Chronicle.
Today on the Midwest Cannabis Chronicle, we're taking a look at a piece in Politico magazine written by Jim Higdon, who's the author of Cornbread Mafia. He's been a guest on the show, and we'll get him back on the show just as soon as possible. I just found this too late to be able to get him on today's show. I just wanted to make sure, though, that we covered this issue because it's something that I think is important as we get to these 2018 midterm elections, which I have been telling people it is very necessary that we take a look at who we're voting for to make sure that as we move forward, we can get some of these amendments passed. We covered in the news how amendments are being blocked by the Rules Committee in the House. And so the people we're voting for could change the balance of power in the House of Representatives, in the Senate even, and that could lead to further reforms for marijuana. So the piece in Politico is entitled, "These Red State Democrats Think Legal Marijuana Can Help Them Win." It's a well-sourced piece, and I encourage everyone to check it out. I'll have a link to it in the news feature from a news post at radicalrush.com. But it starts by discussing a attorney by the name of Dan Cannon. He's a civil rights attorney. He's running for Congress in Indiana's 9th Congressional District. And he was one of the plaintiff attorneys in the Obergefell versus Hodges case that legalized same-sex marriage. And he's coming out in strong support for medical marijuana. He told Jim at Politico, quote, "I think anytime you have an issue with such a high degree of bipartisan support in 2018, you have to pay attention to it. And it's appealing because it touches on so many other things. Creates a new industry with jobs, good for agriculture, alleviates pressures placed on the criminal justice system, reduces overdose deaths, is a natural pain reliever, can raise massive tax revenue, etc." So this is a remarkable development because we're finally getting Democratic politicians that are angling for federal office who are not taking the wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed Hillary Clinton stance of, oh, it needs more research. We need to study medical marijuana. We need some research. No, this is a politician who understands we've got enough research. We've got a majority of our states that have some form of medical marijuana law, and we have millions of people who can attest to how it has helped them medically. So they're taking a look at the polling numbers, and they say in Indiana, 2016 poll showed support for medical marijuana was 73%. 73%. And this is a greater support than then Governor Mike Pence got in his elections. It's greater support than just about any other issue in the state of Indiana. This led Cannon back in December to release a web video ad where he publicly made a strong pro-marijuana statement. This is Dan Cannon's Indiana web video, just the audio from it.
I'm Dan Cannon, and I approve this message because we need real solutions to real problems. Here's one simple solution that's long overdue. We need to legalize medical marijuana nationwide. Marijuana will curb dependence on addictive pharmaceuticals, it'll cut down on overdoses, and it'll help patients dealing with chronic pain. Not only that, but medical marijuana creates a whole new industry. It provides a new crop for our family farmers, and it frees up the police to protect our communities. We need real solutions that work for real people.
Now, Cannon got coverage in the UK Independent for his stance, where he very strongly comes out and says that the opioid crisis that's gripping Indiana and so many other states can be addressed by removing what he calls, quote, an anachronism. The criminalization of marijuana is an anachronism. There's no place for it in 21st century America. Now, he's not personally a user. He says, quote, "I've never personally enjoyed using it." But he brings up the statistics that are showing that where medical marijuana is available, we see a massive decrease in the problems related to opioid overdose, opioid addiction, opioid use. So it's a turnaround because, like I said, 2016 election, Hillary Clinton couldn't even come around to saying that she supported medical marijuana. She could just basically say, it needs more study and we need to study things. It's time that the Democratic Party recognizes, as this Dan Cannon in Indiana does, that full-throated support for medical marijuana, no caveats, no ifs, ands, or buts, no study commissions, is what young voters, what energized voters are looking for. And too many Democrats out there, I think, are thinking they can just ride in a blue wave in 2018 that's basically a referendum on Trump, that there's so much anti-Trump going on that they can just coast in on that. And I think they could be blindsided if they don't start paying attention to some of these issues that are usually associated with the far left of the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders wing, the more liberal-minded people, and realize that it's not a liberal thing anymore. Support for medical marijuana is enjoyed, above 90% support for Democrats and independents for years now, and it's even supported by huge majorities of Republicans. This is as bipartisan an issue as you can get. So kudos to this Indiana's Dan Cannon here for recognizing the issue and getting in front of it. And after he released this ad, of course, he's running for Congress there, and he's got an opponent in the Democratic primary. Her name is Liz Watson, and she's a law school professor. And she detailed her pro-medical marijuana position. She says, quote, "In southern Indiana, we are battling a raging opioid epidemic. The last thing we need is for the federal government to punish people for turning to non-addictive alternatives to opioids. We also do not need the federal government restricting study into the medicinal uses of marijuana. Federal law currently categorizes marijuana as Schedule I narcotic, along with heroin, while oxycodone is Schedule II. That makes no sense." So this is great that she's, pro-marijuana as well. Both Democratic candidates there supporting the medical marijuana. As we look close to Indiana, bordering Indiana, we have the state of Kentucky. And in the state of Kentucky, we've got a Democratic candidate there who is running for the 6th congressional district, just right across the Ohio River, University of Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky University. And there's 3 Democrats that are running in the primary. And State Senator Reggie Thomas is one of them. He's representing a portion of Lexington in the Kentucky Senate. So he's a state senator running for federal Congress. He is the first to come out in favor of medical marijuana with a web video I've edited slightly just for length. But this is State Senator Reggie Thomas from Eastern Kentucky.
The evidence is clear. Medical marijuana helps people with chronic pain and other medical conditions. In states where medical marijuana is legal, there has been a sharp reduction in opioid-related deaths. It's long past time Kentucky and the country accept this and move forward. Attorney General Sessions' interference with states on this issue is a major overreach and hypocritical. Allowing trained medical professionals to prescribe marijuana is just common sense. I'm Reggie Thomas, and that's my take for the day.
Now, Reggie Thomas posts that as a web video. One of his opponents, Amy McGrath, responded by tweeting, quote, "Many veterans suffering from chronic pain and PTSD report improved healthcare outcomes from medical cannabis. I'm proud to stand with the American Legion in advocating for more research." End quote. So here we have a Democrat in Kentucky afraid to make that step, afraid to come out and say, we need medical marijuana now, staying there on that safe spot, what she thinks is a safe spot of we need more research. And it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in Kentucky, whether the primary voters there are going to make a distinction on these two candidates based on one being more pro-marijuana than the other. The mayor of Lexington is the third Democrat who's trying to win the Republican seat. And he says, quote, "I'm for Congress either legalizing medical marijuana across the country or getting out of the way and letting states decide whether to regulate and tax marijuana. That means removing it as a Schedule I drug. I support state-level legislation, but until Congress acts, these state laws may not be enough." End quote. So 2 Democrats running that seem to have a fairly pro-medical marijuana position, though Gray's not coming right out and saying he thinks his state should decide to regulate and tax marijuana. He's saying states should be able to, which is kind of a passive voice way of implying that he supports it without actually saying he has to support it. So if you're in Indiana or Kentucky and you have if you're in the districts that could vote for either Dan Cannon or Reggie Thomas, take a look at this as their pro-marijuana positions. Support them in the primaries and send a signal to the Democratic Party that you need to be straight up with the voters out front about your support for medical marijuana. It makes no sense to be wishy-washy on this issue anymore when it's got such great support. And it's happening not just in Indiana, not just Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, House races there. We have pro-medical marijuana candidates, Senate races in Texas and Nevada, all featuring Democratic candidates who stand in favor of changing federal marijuana laws, fighting against Republicans who stand for the status quo. In West Virginia, it's Richard Ojeda. He's a retired U.S. Army major and a state senator, currently going for Congress in the 3rd District. He says, quote, anyone with half a brain should know that marijuana should never be Schedule 1, end quote. Anyone with half a brain. Of course, West Virginia, one of the most recent states to pass a medical marijuana law. Nearly 68% of the West Virginians voted for Donald Trump. So it's, ultra Trump country. But medical marijuana's acceptance there has gone from 61% in early 2017 to 67% today. Medical marijuana is about as popular as Donald Trump is in West Virginia. If it can pass there, it can pass anywhere. And Ojeda also is good on going beyond just medical marijuana. He criticizes federal mandatory minimums for marijuana cultivation. He says, quote, 1 to 5 years, that's garbage, and then tells Jim Higdon that outlaw marijuana growers shouldn't go to prison at all. It should be a misdemeanor for a first offense, and the harshest sentence for a repeat offender should be home confinement. Yeah, confine the grower to home where he's growing all that marijuana. That sounds like a decent plan to me. There are others in the article. You can check it out on Politico.com. Title of the article is These Red State Democrats Think Legal Marijuana Can Help Them Win. Check it out on Politico. And big thanks to Jim Higdon for making this piece available online. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll finish things off with a radical rant for the day, taking on NBC affiliate KGW in Portland, Oregon for their portrayal of BHO explosions, butane hash oil. Coming up next here on the Marijuana Agenda.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by Cannabis Kamikaze, a professional licensed producer from Canada producing 3 pounds per light. Follow Cannabis Kamikaze on Twitter at Cannabis Kamikaze. That's at Cannabis, Kamikaze. Cannabis Kamikaze.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And yes, we will overcome addiction in America. We are going to overcome addiction in America.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana. Today in the United States, polls regularly show that 3 in 5 Americans support the legalization of adult access to cannabis. Support for medical marijuana regularly approaches and exceeds 9 in 10 Americans. But after 80 years of failed prohibition, the government wants to bring back the worst excesses of the drug war 1980s. That's like totally bogus, you know? It's not tubular.
Health Cannabinoid, your ACMPR experts. Consultation services for medical cannabis. Visit healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. That's www.healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. Health Cannabinoid.
total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am here.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of
People don't smoke marijuana.
Radical rant. Well, today in the rant, we take a look at a piece from KGW News Channel 8 here in Portland, Oregon, the NBC affiliate that is reporting on a story that happened a few months ago, it was last summer. And the story has to do with butane hash oil, and particularly the butane that is so easily purchased throughout the city and all around the state in caseload quantities. And well, the first thing about it is the title. The title is "Hash Oil's Main Ingredient is Easy to Buy." Hash oil's main ingredient, yeah. Butane is an ingredient in hash oil like campfires is an ingredient in s'mores. Yeah, you need a campfire to make s'mores, but you're not eating campfire, right? Yeah, I might get a little bit of ash in there, but all right. Yes, you need butane to make butane hash oil, but it's not an ingredient, at least if you're doing it right. I guess if you're not purging it, you can have some butane in there, but anybody worth their salt is not leaving any butane in there. So that's my first criticism, is calling it an ingredient. What's going on, for those of you who don't know, is that with marijuana, you can pack it into a tube. You can pack a bunch of your leaves and trim into a tube that has a little hole on the end of it, and you can spray a bunch of butane from one of them, butane refill cans. You can spray a whole bunch of butane into that tube, and it strips the cannabinoids and the terpenes and the oils. It strips it right off of the plant material and goes right through that little hole at the end. It collects in a little pie tin at the bottom, and your little pie tin there has got a mix of the cannabinoid goo and butane, but then butane, it evaporates off. When it evaporates off, you get yourself a plate of stuff that you can sell for $50 a gram. Now, I realize that people listening out there might go, Russ, did you just explain in somewhat detail how to make BHO? Yes. You're not getting anything from me you can't get from a million YouTube videos, and that's what's happening. People are getting this information from YouTube videos, and they are doing this butane blasting, we call it, and they're not doing it in a proper setting where it's ventilated. And this butane, when it evaporates, it's a gas that's heavier than air. So it pools and collects, sits there and it's odorless and invisible, right? So you don't know you're sitting in this pool of butane gas. And next thing you know, if there's a spark, and there could be even just a little bit of static electricity spark across the carpet, boom, you blow up. So the KGW News piece, of course, starts with the story of this place in Northeast Portland on Kirby Avenue, Kirby Street, whatever, that blew up. And I mean, literally, the house blowed up. Like, there is no house left. Like we're talking Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote, nothing but boards sitting around a crater, kind of blowed up. So this is how they begin the story.
It was completely blown away. All walls were down. Even the foundation was blown up.
You can still see the destruction. Butane gas used to make hash oil kills two and blows a home on Kirby Lane in Northeast Portland to smithereens.
It felt like I was walking into a war zone.
So, of course, KGW has to explain in detail or just give a little explanation of what's going on with the butane, why that's the problem.
The blast was caused by the butane used in the process of extracting the oil from the part of the marijuana plant that is normally thrown away.
So again, the trim, the stuff that you would get no value out of whatsoever, you can get $50 a gram out of if you blow a can of butane through it. And butane is cheap and easy to get. And that's what they're focusing on in this story, is that the butane is easy to get. You can get it by the case, and they say a 300 milliliter can, one of them standard cans, will fill a butane lighter for several years. But illegal hash oil cookers are buying it by the caseload at convenience stores and head shops all around town. And they're right. I used to live in Northeast Portland, and there was a little bodega I used to go to get candy bars or whatever. And they literally had boxes and boxes and boxes of butane stacked for sale. And people regularly buying those boxes. And you know what people are doing with them. Now, I don't want to live next to someone that's blowing butane hash oil and taking the risk of blowing up me and my dogs, my chickens, or anything like that. So this is, I'm not doing this rant here to demean or dismiss the concern about the exploding houses. What I've got a problem with, though, is what they're considering here as the solution. The problem I've got here is that they're taking a look at a problem that exists under legalization, and that is people can grow weed now. Perfectly legal to grow weed. Now, this problem existed before, but it's gotten worse since we've had better access, right? People can grow weed. They'll have a lot of plant material, and they can get $50 a gram for it if they blow some butane through it. It's just a matter of profit, as all of these drug problems usually are. So what are they proposing for a problem of legalization? They're proposing more prohibition. This is one of the law enforcement people they spoke to and how he'd deal with the BHO explosion problem.
Knowing what I know, I would be going after butane sales. If they could limit sales, I think that would be just like taking ephedrine away from the meth production. Okay,
so he'd go after the sales. They think the way to deal with exploding houses and to stop people from open blasting BHO is to stop stores from selling boxes of butane, to restrict the sales of butane. And you heard him make an analogy to what we did with methamphetamine. That was a big problem in the 90s and the 2000s, exploding meth labs. And part of how they dealt with the exploding meth labs, in Oregon specifically, is passed a law that severely restricted your access to pseudoephedrine. I think you need a prescription to get it here in the state of Oregon. If not, it's one of those you got to show a license and get your name on a database or something. A lot of states have done that as well. All I know is when I get a cold, about the only thing that works for me to dry me out to be able to do my show is pseudoephedrine. Can't get it in this state without a whole lot of hassle. Got to drive across the river to Washington State and get it. And that leads me to the problem with their solution. They are proposing more prohibition as the solution to a problem with legalization. It's just this time, instead of prohibiting weed, we're going to prohibit butane. We're going to prohibit butane. We're going to put limits on butane, how much butane people can buy, how you can get butane. And I'm telling you right now, every illegal hash oil dealer in the state is going, yes, do it. Absolutely do it. Why? Because right now, the people that are brewing up their illegal hash oil are doing so to make a profit either here in the state by undercutting what you have to pay for this stuff in the state stores, which is around 30 to 50 a gram. Or they're doing it and processing it and sending it out of state, where places like New York, you can get $100 a gram for some of this high potency BHO. So if we limit and restrict the ability of people to get butane, one thing it will do, guaranteed, is create a black market in butane. You're going to have people driving across the border to Washington State or south of the border to California or to Nevada to Idaho, wherever they got to go to get their butane. Or two, order it on the internet. They'll just order it on the internet and have it shipped. But having to even go through that much hassle is going to raise the price of their product. They're going to be able to make more on their product. Now, there is a solution to this. There is absolutely a solution to this, and it's they danced around it. They got so close to talking about it, they didn't quite get it. Here's another one of the experts talking about the problem with BHO, the legal BHO.
There are only a few processors that extract it because it is an expensive investment in equipment to extract it and make oil.
There are only a few legal processors here in the state of Oregon, people licensed by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to process marijuana. Why are there so few? when this is something that can sell for $50 a gram? Why so few? Well, because the regulations that you have to follow, the safety level you have to follow to do this, these guys don't get to use just a tube and some butane. They have to buy $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 machines that are cold or closed loop processing machines that recycle and capture the excess gas, and it's expensive. It could be $500,000 to $1 million to get yourself up and running as a licensed processor. But they didn't quite get to what the problem is. Didn't quite get to what the actual problem is. And that is, people got a bunch of trim. And they know they can get more product out of it by blasting it. Instead of trying to attack the supply of butane necessary to make the BHO, the real solution is to attack the demand for the BHO. Why do the people need to have the BHO? Because without the BHO, they can't turn their trim into oil. What if somebody else turned the trim into oil for them? Hello, that's the solution right there. Give people the ability to take their trim products to a licensed Oregon processor who then turns it into oil for that person. There's your solution. Right now, those processors have to work within the OLCC system. They could only get their product from licensed OLCC growers. But if they can get their product from every Tom, Dick, and Harry and Sue, Annie, and Leah that's growing weed out there, if they can take their own bags of trim into the trim shop or the processing shop, whatever you want to call it, drop it off and come back and get product, get oil, people would pay for that service. Or better yet, make it a situation where you take in your garbage bag full of trim to get it processed into oil, and whatever the results of that process are, 20% of the result, 20% of the yield is donated to patients. How about that? How about we set up something where people can make something good out of their garbage, out of their trim that they're not going to be able to use for anything else, and help patients get free medicine? What an idea. And if this were possible, if people were able to take their own trim in and get it processed, we'd start to see the prices of this BHO come down. And folks, long term, that's the only thing that's going to stop the BHO explosions. Short term, give us a place to take the trim. Because in the short term, we can take it to a licensed processor, but still that's not going to eliminate all the BHO blowing because there'll be some cost to it. And whatever that cost is probably more expensive than a tube and a can of butane. But at least short term, we'll take some of it out. And in that process of taking out some of the BHO production, we'll bring the price down by flooding the market with more and more of this BHO. As the price of BHO comes down in the legal stores, the need to buy it from an illicit processor starts to fall. And the better we have a better situation we'll have for everyone with cheaper, more accessible, more plentiful BHO. Now, of course, the problem with my solution, I always say that the solution to legalization problems isn't more prohibition, it's more legalization. But the timid people among us, the policymakers and the bureaucrats can't hear that. Their mindset is still, oh my God, this is a terribly dangerous thing. This is a terribly, terribly dangerous thing, and we got to be super careful about how much we release. If we release too much, terrible things will happen. No, if you keep restricting it, terrible things will happen. You know what else blows up like a BHO lab? Like a BHO process. You know what else blows up like a BHO process? Moonshine stills. Yeah, you do it wrong when you're trying to make moonshine and you can blow up a still. Why don't we see that more often? Because the price of getting a bottle of Jack Daniels or vodka or whatever the hell else is so low and the access is so plentiful, nobody's going to go through the trouble of building a still in the backwoods and making some shitty moonshine. Now, again, won't completely completely eliminate it. There are still some moonshiners. They do still exist. Not going to completely eliminate it, but nothing's ever going to completely eliminate it. How much we can eliminate it is based on how many other options there are. What they can't understand is that you can't eliminate the law of supply and demand.
The potency of hash oil is almost pure. Some say 90% pure THC, nearly 5 times as potent as a normal joint.
And that means people are going to want it. People are going to continue to want this product. And so long as it has such a massive profit margin, there's going to be people that'll take that risk, that don't mind the chance that they might blow up, are willing to go to the extra mile to turn their trash into cash. It's just so obvious. And one last point about this is it goes back to his comparison with the meth labs. That we'd go after the butane sales because that's what we did with the pseudoephedrine. That's how we were able to deal with that.
Knowing what I know, I would be going after butane sales. If they can limit sales, I think that would be just like taking ephedrine away from the meth production.
And the thing about that is, while we took the ephedrine off the shelves here in Oregon, and it did have an effect on how many meth labs were blowing up, it didn't really have an effect on meth. Still demand for meth out there, still people dealing with meth problems. What it did, as prohibition always does, is it forced the people that were producing the drug to come up with innovative new ways to do so. Some of them innovated by doing smurfing, which is where you get people to go to shop after shop after shop after shop, buying what little bit of pseudoephedrine they could get, and then bring it all to the cook. But the other is an insidious new method of making meth called the shake and bake method, or the one pot method, where they can take a 2-liter bottle and put the ingredients in a 2-liter bottle and shake it, keep their backpack, and create meth that way. So the meth never went away. And these shake and bakes, they explode too. They can cause damage. They can cause harm. Except now it's not somebody's house or some, RV out in the middle of the desert that's blowing up. It's some kid's backpack at a bus stop or at a store or at a school. There's always unintended consequences whenever you try to prohibit something that there is a massive demand for. You can't eliminate the law of supply and demand. And as long as there's this massive demand for BHO and a massive profit to be made from it, all you'll get by trying to restrict the sales of butane is create a black market in butane. You create people that'll be going across borders to get it, to bring it in. They'll be ordering it off the internet. It's a question of satisfying the supply. Get the price of BHO out of this ridiculous $50 a gram range, $30 a gram range. Get it down to a level where it's just not profitable to try to blow a bunch of BHO. Where it's just somebody who's got a bunch of trim can take it to the processor shop and have it done correctly and know that what they're getting has been properly purged. Know that what they're getting has been tested and doesn't have any harmful heavy metals or other materials in it. We've got to make it possible, and this is where the culture war aspect of this comes in, is the people that are in charge here, that are dealing with this issue, still see it as something that needs to be repressed. We've got to stop people from doing this. We've got to find a way to to incentivize them not to want to do it. No, if people are going to want BHO, it's not your decision as to whether that's good, whether that's moral. It's just up to us to reduce the harm from it. And the only way we can stop people from wanting to blast BHO is to provide them more attractive options. Cheaper BHO at the stores, a place to take your trim to get it processed yourself into the oil that you want. That's the only thing that's going to do this. The solution to problems with legalization is never more prohibition. It is more legalization. I will say that until my dying day. All right. We're here at the end of the hour, first hour. Thanks for joining us, listeners. If you're still adjusting, we are now a weekly podcast. You'll get this hour one for free every week by visiting our page at mjagenda.com. You can find the RSS feeds and other links. Also available, podcast links at radicalruss.com in the top menu. Stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, available as podcast for our VIPs.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You think you're free, you plan it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you